Woke up with a headache and some neck pain. Cup of coffee, need the caffeine. Oh, I don't know the last time I wasn't tired. Check out in the fast lane. The lady asked if I've been having me a nice day. Oh yeah, I said that I'm fine, guess that I'm a liar. Cause yeah, I'm fine. If F is for feeling overwhelmed, then I is for I'm not alright. Yeah, I'm fine. If N is for not being able to sleep, E for every night. Yeah, I'm fine. Finally feeling the pressure of keeping my feelings inside. Yeah, I'm fine. Well, maybe I'm not, and I just need to tell someone I'm not alright.
All right, here we are. Sheldon.
Here we are.
Sheldon, what's your full name?
Sheldon Roberts.
Sheldon Roberts. From where?
Florida.
Florida.
I mean, grew up, lived a lot of different places growing up.
Okay.
Moved around a lot, but born in Florida, joined the Army in Florida. So
Yeah.
I would say Florida seems to be home.
Okay. So we're gonna go through this interview, and it may take 15 minutes. It take me 15 minutes, whatever it takes to tell the true story. Really excited the fact that got the opportunity. You accepted us to come into your home, sit down, and really talk about some personal stuff. I know that's tough for a lot of people to be open.
Glad to have you guys here.
So, anyway, this is kind of a mini part series that we're starting, which is, feel something, say something. We'll kind of cover that at the end, but what I'd like to do is kind of start at the beginning. Tell me, where'd you grow up? What was growing up like?
Moved around a lot. My dad was kind of a jack of all trades. He just did a lot of different things, and so we kind of moved around when he'd find a better job, or we'd find something else to do. It was I don't know. It always seemed kind of normal to me, but
Yeah. A little bit of a gypsy in a way. So tell me, like, what was the driving force in your life that said, I'm going to join the Army?
I guess I always kind of felt like if you can serve, that you should. That it's part of what's built this country, and what gives us the ability to say the things that we do and practice our beliefs. And so with that, I kind of felt it was an obligation to at least attempt to serve. And so didn't really get out a lot, when I was younger, and I was kind of small for my age most of my childhood. So I guess it was probably a bit of a shock for my parents when at 17 I said, "Oh, hey, I want to join the Army." I tried talking to recruiters. That didn't go so well. They'd make appointments, not keep them, things like that, and had kind of given up on it. But my buddy had given my number to his recruiter, who apparently never called or anything, but he got replaced, and the guy called me and was like, "Hey, are you still interested?" And I was like, "No, not really." He was like, "Well, what if I show up at your house? Like, I'll bring you some information. Like, we could talk about it, bring practice as bad." And lived in a town with one stoplight, middle of nowhere.
Okay.
Yeah. At the time. So I was like, "Well, yeah, if you can find the place, And he showed up an hour early, and it was Tuesday afternoon, actually.
So you remember the day of the week? Tuesday afternoon.
It was a Tuesday afternoon.
Why would you? That's interesting. What was significant about that? Just obviously impactful day that you actually remember the day
Tuesday.
of the week.
It was impactful in the aspect of, that started my life on a different course. When I was in high school, I applied for the Florida Bright Future Scholarship, which specifically the one I applied for covers 100% tuition to any school in the state of Florida.
Oh, wow.
And for 4 years. And unfortunately, I I did all of the things, but the paperwork was sent to one of the teachers at the high school, and I didn't receive the some pretty important paperwork until after the deadline for it, and I lost out on that scholarship that I worked for all of high school. And at that point, I had, you
No
know,
plans.
I had no plans. Like I was planning on going to college. Like I was waiting on this scholarship to go through so I could start applying to different schools, and I was probably going to go to UF because that was one of the closest universities where I lived, and uh, they have a really good civil engineering program that I was interested in. And
So plans fall through. Next thing you
yep,
know, this army recruiter
yeah,
walks
he
in,
calls out of the blue, and
walks in there.
I jokingly said yeah, and he was like, "All right, walk free on Tuesday. Like,
I'm free on
how about
Tuesday.
that?"
Famous
And
last words. I'm
yeah,
free on Tuesday. So when did
so
you
he was
sign
supposed
up?
to be there like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He showed up at like 1, I think,
Yeah.
and
How,
uh,
some from that moment, how long did it take until you were in the army?
I want to say that was either August or it was probably August of 2008, and I shipped off to basic October 9th.
That's pretty quick.
Yeah.
And you shipped off when you went to into the army. Do you know what you were going to be in the army, or was that
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Army actually lets you pick your
Oh,
job.
okay. Gotcha.
Unlike you guys,
Yeah, we're just rolling the dice.
Yeah.
So that's for another story. So,
Um,
so you're shipped off. You're on your way, and your life changes like that.
yeah, I went from a one stoplight town to
Were you
now
first,
I'm out on my own. And
were you first generation military joining in your family?
my father was in the Air Force, but I didn't grow up with him. He didn't come back in my life until I was 17.
Yeah.
So I didn't really learn a lot about him from that aspect. Uh, my my stepdad, who I call my dad, he wasn't military. His dad wasn't military or anything. And so I guess my uncle, who was 82nd, was probably the only one that I really like saw when he was in the military and had any experience with. And then my grandfather and my great uncles on my mom's side, they were all Army actually.
Hmm. So you ship off. I saw in your book you went to Kentucky, right?
Yep.
Army, yeah.
Fort Knox.
Yeah, Fort Knox, and a little bit of dig on the Marine Corps in there. I saw. But we're all laughing about that today. So you go through this. You join. You get through. You graduate boot camp.
Uh-huh.
What's the feeling you're going through then?
Oh,
After that?
I thought I was invincible.
Invincible.
Yeah, and so the dig on the Marine Corps in that letter was because my older sibling joined the Marine Corps and came back. Oh, I'm hot shit. Like
We got that
better, better than
yeah.
better than everyone. And so then I graduated basic and everything. Did level 1 combatives training and everything. And when I when I went on Christmas leave that year after basic, I went down to Port St. Lucie, Florida, where my sibling was living at the time, and we did 3 rounds, and all 3 times that it was a tap out by my sibling within 30 seconds or so, and I was like, yeah, that Marine Corps training really did something.
What was his MOS? Do you know what he?
It's supposed to be communications.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I believe it was communications.
All right. Very well. So you're high. You're just on the top of the world.
Yep.
And then shortly after you go to jump school, right?
I went to Fort Huachuca before that, and I didn't actually get to go to airborne school until after my first deployment.
Okay, so we went on deployment.
Yeah, I went to Fort Huachuca, did I think it was like 7 months out there or so, and then came down on orders for Bragg. Um, the guy I was rooming with there at Fort Huachuca, he also had orders to the same unit. So we were roommates at Bragg, and then we deployed together. And then, yeah, like we deployed within a month of getting to Bragg.
So tell me about the deployments. What was that like? What was the workup like? What was the deployment like?
It it was an interesting experience. Did
And then what year was this around?
That was 2009 to 2010. We did 12 months all over RC West in Afghanistan, and
Mhm.
it was eh, I, I don't know. I didn't like. I mean, I did my job quite a bit, but at the same time, like I also volunteered for a lot of additional duties, or got voluntold for a lot of additional duties,
Mhm.
and so it was busy.
Mm.
You know,
And how long were the Army deployments during this deployment? How long?
that was 12 months,
12 months. Yeah.
and then the second deployment we did in 2012, that one was 9.
Okay. Gotcha. Do you lose any guys when you're going through these deployments?
Yeah, we lost a few,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
So when you come back, now you told me that you had an injury. Where is that in all of this?
that was
Deployments.
towards the end of my second deployment.
Second deployment.
Yeah, had some. I walk away from the things that like you really think people shouldn't walk away from, but
Yeah.
then it's the little stupid things that get me. During my second deployment, I was asleep on a cot, laying on my stomach. I had bought a TV off of the unit that we had replaced, and it was sitting on top of some, those stackable plastic drawers.
Mhm.
Um, the TV was sitting on top of it, and uh, we were staying in an Alaskan tent at that point in time. Um, so we had poncho liners up and stuff, making our little
Mhm.
18 square foot sections, and
Right.
the guy that was in the tent next to me, he was taking his IOTV off and tripped on a pair of headphones he had left on the floor, and he fell and landed on the back into the back of those plastic drawers
Mm.
and knocked the TV over on top of me,
Mm.
and it fell a couple of feet down and went corner first underneath my left shoulder blade and tore the rhomboid.
Mm.
And I woke up. I was in intense pain. Tried to sleep it off. Didn't get better. Went to the aid station. They said, "Oh, you've got a thoracic strain. Here's some ibuprofen and some Motrin and some
Yeah.
Celebrex or something like this. Drink some water, and
Yeah.
here's a light duty profile for a week,
Yeah.
something like that." And
In the Marine Corps, they would just tell you to change your socks. You'd be all right. That's how they would do it for us. But yeah. Okay.
well, on flight status,
Yeah. Yeah.
had that
They
highlight,
would. That's right. That's right. We would say, "Oh yeah, take an ibuprofen and change your socks. You'll be okay."
Yep.
So that happens. That's kind of a freak.
That was
accident.
what they said when I blew this knee out.
Yeah. Yep. So that happens. But it's not contributed to what's happened to you while we're here
Nope.
today.
Nope.
Okay. So tell us, kind of start bringing us to this.
So the injury to my back plagued me for the last 2 years I was in the Army. I was having back spasms, things like that. So I wound up getting medically separated. The VA only recognized it as 10%.
Mhm.
Um, the or no, I'm sorry. The VA recognized it as 60% my total filing, but the Army only rated me at 10% disabled
Mhm.
on my discharge. So I got medically separated, not retired, or
And what year did this TV thing happen?
2012.
Because I remember kids that don't know this today, but TVs used to be really heavy.
Yeah, like it wasn't a big TV, but it had a built-in DVD player.
really heavy.
And
So
like this is in Afghanistan, so it's already outdated technology.
yeah, this isn't
was
the latest. So this has got some girth.
35,
some weight
40
behind it.
pound TV.
Yeah. Okay.
Like
So this ends
it
up.
probably wasn't actually that heavy, but dang, it felt like it.
Yeah.
It had 20 pounds at least.
So obviously your performance probably is degraded. It's tough to assimilate into your unit.
I mean, I
having
was
issues.
having back spasms that had me going horizontal.
Yeah.
Sometimes I was actually shopping with friends one time and had a back spasm that caused me to fall into the shelves at the grocery store and knock shelves off the wall, which was quite embarrassing at the time.
Do you ever feel any guilt for not being part of the unit at times because you're going through this?
Well, I mean, I still at up until the unit disbanded, I was still actively part of it. I still I did a lot of duties. I filled a lot of roles.
Yeah.
I did funeral
Cool.
detail at one point. I worked on an engagement skills trainer range. I was the CBurn NCO for my company. I was hazmat for my platoon. Um,
Is there any culminating event that finally drove you to say, I got to do a med board and take a look at this to see if I can continue my career?
um, it was it was the unit disbanding. I had to PCS, and you can't PCS when you're on profile, and so it came down to, all right, well, and I was grounded by the FAA, so
Mhm.
I couldn't um,
Change over.
I couldn't do my job
Yeah.
specifically, and so
Did ever that it, did that ever make you feel because you couldn't do that job? How did that make you feel? Like, I mean,
well, as I said, I did a lot of other
so
duties
did
instead, so I still was very much a contributing member.
hmm
Um, I kind of was the catch-all guy. That, oh, we need something done.
you
Go
found other ways
Roberts.
to contribute.
Yeah.
Make it, yeah, understood. So so you go through the med board. And it took you what, 2 years? You said.
No, the med board was started 2014, the year I got out. It took about 6 months or so,
Okay.
7 months. I think it was started in March and ended in October.
So you're out.
Yeah, I was out.
How was that? How did that make you feel?
Little bit of trepidation, but at the time I was in a committed relationship, and I got a severance check because I was separated, and I used that money to buy a piece of property that was next door to my grandmother, who was dealing with some health issues at the time. And you know, while yes, I was told I couldn't do my job and I had to be medically separated, I didn't feel disabled or anything. So I was, active in trying to help her with things, and you know, uh, took a job when I got out with AutoZone just so I had a job that I could move,
Mm.
and found better employment from there.
So as you're transitioning out, do you feel like you had a plan yet, or are you still kind of figuring it out?
I was still figuring it out
Yeah.
for sure. I had a lot of things I wanted to do, but I didn't know how I was going to be able to accomplish them. And I also I didn't know, where do I want to live? Like, where do I want to say this is home? Because I've traveled a lot. I've been a lot of different places, and every place has its own, unique thing that it can offer.
When you joined the army, did you ever imagine the day that you were going to get out?
Nope. I was planning on doing a career, making a career out of it.
Yeah.
I was going to be a lifer.
So I mean, there's got to be some little bit of a shock here for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was.
So you got to feel a little unprepared in a way. So was there anything the army's doing to try to help you transition through this into this next life?
Well, I mean, like they have the transition stuff that they make mandatory, um, and I went to the Warrior Transition Unit when I was getting med boarded out because the unit disbanded. So I did have some advantages there. There was more resources that I could find, but overall, I mean, their main focus was helping me check off the boxes. Not the how are you going to be in
Turn
5
in your
years.
gear and
It's
write
hey,
your
let's
resume.
make sure you're going to be good in 30 days,
Yeah.
but not how are you going to be in 5 years from now.
What would you tell a young soldier coming out going through? They had to go through the same thing you did. What would you tell them?
Number one, get everything documented. Everything. Uh, I had issues with my when I got out, my last move. They pay for you to move all of your stuff to go home, and they paid me. I want to say it was $1,800 to move all of my stuff to the property I bought in Alabama, and then uh, apparently there was an issue. A form was not found or something like that, and I couldn't locate where I'd saved the copies of my way slips and all of that. And next thing I know, I got a letter in the mail saying, and debt collectors calling me for a $2,800 debt after they added their fees and everything else.
Mm.
And I had to, I had to pay that back because it was a federal debt. Um,
So I'm gonna get into the tough questions, the meat and potatoes of why we're here. Is so today, there's at one point you had lost mobility and almost entirely. You were in a
Yep.
wheelchair, right?
Yep.
Now you've got a
So
little
I,
bit more,
with
right?
with getting medically separated, I was given 5 years of health care through the VA, 100% total health care through the VA, and so I got out in 2014, and then in 2018, 4 years later, I developed numbness in my left hand, and went to the Tuskegee VA where I was assigned at the time, and
It's in Alabama.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Went there and they set me up with an appointment for a nerve conduction study. We thought that it was related to the back injury because it started on the same side,
Hmm.
same arm that the shoulder was injured. Um, so they set me up for a nerve test and an occupational therapy appointment. Uh, had to wait a month for those, and there was no follow up visits or anything like that scheduled afterwards. It was just those two appointments. Um, Waited the month. By then, it was the end of October of 2018. Um, and the nerve conduction test said that I had nerve damage in both arms. Um,
They tell you why.
no, no, it just measures it. It doesn't.
Just all of a sudden,
Yep.
4 years later, you wake up and you have
Yep.
all this.
Just
You don't know why.
I have, and I knew at that point it was progressing because it had transitioned from just numbness to a burning sensation. And they measured my strength, my hand strength, and my dominant hand, my left hand being my dominant hand, should have been stronger than my right. And I could exert 120 pounds of force with my right hand, but only 90 with my left. And
So within about 60 days, you've gone from perfectly healthy to
yeah,
like
yeah,
there's something major wrong.
there's something going on. And then it picked up from there and progressed even faster. That was the end of October. Um, I won some tickets to Fright Night at Six Flags over Atlanta, and went to Six Flags two days, probably 2 days later. I should mention I also uh, did a walk in the next day after my nerve test and occupational therapy appointment because occupational therapy said, here's a glove for the sensation issues and here's a hand strengthener for you. That was all they could do.
What's the glove supposed to do?
Just to protect the skin from touching things. So that way, you know, I didn't feel,
Cover it up.
yeah, everything burned, even the air. So then having something to protect
Even the
it,
air would
yeah.
burn.
And then soft things, even still, soft things feel kind of like sandpaper. Um, they're a lot more coarse and
Hmm.
can get almost painful sometimes to brush up against things. Um, so, anyways, I went in as a walk in the following day. They told me there was no doctor that'd be able to see me or anything. So, what do I need? And I said, well, said I have nerve damage. Obviously, I need to see a neurologist and see what's going on. And the nurses said, all right, we'll put in a consult with the doctor and we'll we'll go from there. And so that was like October 29th or something like that. Then I went to Six Flags, probably the 30th of that month or something like that. And afterwards, had a sore throat and stuff, and noticed some swelling in the lymph nodes on my right side. Um, Thought I'd pick something up while I was there. Friend of mine who was a nurse, I was with her and her husband, and she pointed out to me, she was like, hey, like your neck is kind of swollen, you probably should go get that checked out. And I was like, yeah, I will if it doesn't clear up in a day or two, but my lymph nodes being a little swollen, or
Yeah, you'll toughen up.
happens when you get, you know, probably got some sort of bug, and
Yeah.
we'll see what happens. Well, then um, I had to, at the time, I had a photography gig lined up that I had to do there in Alabama. So I was waiting till the second week of November to drive down to Tallahassee to spend, you know, some of November with my family for Thanksgiving and everything. And so I drove down. It was like the second week of November or so. Uh, I brought some firearms to, go to my brother-in-law's family's private range. We were gonna go do some practice shooting and
You have a good time.
stuff like that. Yeah, just have a good time. I was gonna hang out for a couple of weeks, and drove myself down here. And by the time I started noticing every morning when I'd wake up, I was noticeably weaker than the day before. Um, I was just losing strength really quick, and it was starting to be in both hands. Um, I helped my dad with a little renovation project that he was doing and stuff, and I started realizing I was getting really tired and struggling to swing the hammer and stuff. And like I did that kind of work, like it was my bread and butter. I loved doing it, and so like it was a little concerning, when I'm about I was actually we were tacking in some insulation underneath the structure, and like I almost hit myself in the face with the claw of the hammer because I just didn't have the strength to hold it up anymore. And then I remember laying in my parents' living room floor and like putting my hands. I'm laying on my back. I put my hands straight up in the air as high as I could, and then like tried to slowly bend it towards my face. And then I'd hit a certain point where it just give out and flop and smack me in the face. And we're all like kind of half chuckling over it because it is kind of funny, but it's you're laughing because that's all you can do because it's a little concerning.
Mm-hmm.
And I was calling the VA every day. I was calling.
This is November still or December?
Yeah, this is November.
Yeah.
I was calling the VA every day, like, hey, like it's getting worse. Like, where are we at on this consult? I need to see a neurologist. Like, I will say, screw it to spending Thanksgiving with my family. I will drive home now to go see a neurologist.
You're getting scared.
Yeah, like
yeah. This is
and
scary.
it got to the point after about 2 weeks of the nurses continually saying, well, it's still sitting on the doctor's desk waiting on him to sign it, and me asking, well, can you encourage him to hurry up? Like, can you say something to him? Like,
Mm-hmm.
let him know this is getting to be an emergency. Like, this is bad.
Yeah.
And nothing was happening. So I called patient advocacy. And the lady at patient advocacy said, well, you've got an appointment in December. You should just wait till then. I said to her, I was like, ma'am, I'm not sure I'm still going to be alive by that point. Because at this point,
what did she say to that?
She was like, well, sir, there's only so much we can do. It was
Some standard answer.
Yeah, it was at that point, it was just, well, yeah, you say that, but I don't really believe you. And I have no interest in actually trying to do anything more than this. Like,
It's got to be kind of a helpless scenario at this point. You're like,
yeah,
what do I do?
yeah, I had no idea what to do. And so like I kept calling and kept calling and kept calling. And then when my appointment rolled around, which was December 8th, by the end of, so I was supposed to drive back home the last week of November after Thanksgiving. And by that point, I couldn't even open a doorknob with either hand. I couldn't grab it and twist the knob. And I bought like hand strengthening.
You're just gonna grunt through this.
Yeah, like I hand strengthening tools and stuff like that to try to.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I just need to work out more. Like I don't know what's going on.
Suck it up, soldier.
Yeah,
Work out more, and
I'm gonna push through this, and
Yeah.
I'm not gonna let this beat me until I get some answers.
Yeah.
And so
what's everybody else telling you during this time? Your family, your friends.
they're like, you need to see somebody. But I had no health insurance or anything. I had the VA. That was it.
That was it.
And at that point in time, it was still kind of questionable. Like if you went to an outside doctor and they said, "Oh, well, you're not going to die from this," you're stuck with that bill. The VA wasn't going to cover it. You couldn't just go to an outside
They
provider.
teach you your medical rights very well when
No.
you go through this. You know.
I mean, they tell you bits and pieces,
Yeah.
and then like the VA tries with their newsletters and stuff like that, but really they need more support for the social workers that are there, and they need the social workers to sit down with each of the veterans and evaluate them and say, "Hey, like, what are your needs, and how can we make sure that they're being met?"
Hmm.
Because, and unfortunately, even a lot of the social workers don't know all of the VA programs.
Hmm.
They don't know what's out there. I spoke with several of them and I asked them, "Hey, well, what about this program? What is that?"
Yeah, it's a big bureaucracy of programs. Yeah.
And so that's that database that I was talking about earlier with, available things, that there needs to be something like that where, you can keyword search based on a condition or
There's so much information to sort through.
There is.
This path. So you obviously get to a point of like, I've got to do something. Tell
So
me
I
about
wound
that.
up the weekend before that appointment, that December 8th appointment. My parents drove me up to my property in Alabama, stayed the weekend with me, and uh, my mom stayed to drive me up to my appointment, which was about 40 something miles away in Tuskegee. And
So so your mom's driving.
my mom's going to stay. So then
Yeah.
December 8th rolls around, morning of, we've got an hour before the appointment. We are walking out the door because it's going to take us that long, almost that long to drive there. So we're walking out the door. My phone rings. It's the VA canceling my appointment. No doctors are there at the facility to see me. They'll have to
So
reschedule for 3 to 4 months.
You had all your hopes in this, and
Yeah, like this was my one chance,
This is
And
when, in December.
December 8th of 2018.
So
And
this started in October, and by December 8th,
This started in September.
September,
September.
by
And then
October or by December.
by this point, I was pretty much entirely paralyzed in both arms. I was pretty much entirely paralyzed in my right leg. I had already started falling and stuff like that, and that was actually how I realized it. The first time I realized I was having issues with my leg, um, my parents had I was staying with my parents still. It was before that December 8th appointment, and my parents had a package delivered to their house, and my dog Emmett, he wasn't expecting somebody to knock on the door, and so when there was knock, he barked, of course, and rushed at the door, and so I hollered at him to knock it off, and I went to step and kind of try to head him off as he rushed towards the door, and my leg didn't move the way it should have. It was really slow, like trying to walk through water with my right leg, and I just boom, fell over, just face planted in the carpet. And my parents looked at me, they're concerned and stuff. I'm rolling around on the floor trying to figure out at this point, with limited use of my arms, how to get up off the ground. And my dad's trying to answer the door to get the package. The dog's still barking. I'm rolling around, and my mom's looking at me like, "Are you okay?"
Man, we laugh about this now, but
Yeah,
God, I'm sure it was a pretty scary moment for you.
it, it was, and at the same time, it wasn't. It was kind of the entire time. It was. I had this "it is what it is" mentality. I there wasn't any point in worrying about a lot of it unless I could do something to change it. And so I tried to follow the steps that I knew about to try to change it. And when that didn't work, that December 8th appointment, when they called and canceled it, we drove to the hospital anyways. And
So
we verified there was no doctor there to see us. And I was in bad shape by that point. I had lost about 40 pounds. The side of my neck was extremely swollen. Um, and like I had no muscular support in my upper torso anymore. So like my shoulder blades were sticking straight out back. They were winging. Um, I I looked bad.
So you drove to civilian,
And huh?
you drove to civilian care at this point.
No,
This is the V.
went another 30-ish miles down the road to Montgomery, where they had an emergency room at their VA facility.
Mhm.
And we went to the emergency room, and there I met Dr. Mack, and he saved my life.
Mm.
He literally, I got put in the room. He walked in, asked my mom to take my shirt off so he could get a better look at my physical condition, asked me a couple of questions, and was in the room less than 5 minutes, said, I think I know what's wrong with you. I'm going to go make some phone calls and get some second opinions. I'll be back. And within a few minutes, he came back, looked at me, and said, I think you have cancer with paraneoplastic syndrome.
Mm.
Just by looking at me, that's how bad of shape I'd gotten
What
at
was-
that point. And as I said, I was calling the VA almost every day, trying to get an appointment, trying to get seen.
when he said you had cancer,
Mm-hmm.
had that even entered your mind?
Oh yeah, I knew it. I knew it without a doubt. I was
So
positive.
was that a
The
relief?
side of
Was that a relief to you, or what was the feeling you went through at that point in time?
it was well, that's what I figured. And so where do we go from here? You know, it was
At least didn't have like some kind of answer.
I've always kind of been the type that, okay, there's a problem, let's address it, let's face it. There's no point in shying away from it. It's not going to change, it's not going to go away. Let's address the problem.
Love that.
And
Yeah.
so with that mentality was really how I took all of it on. So from there, it was, okay, what can we do now? And he said, well, I'm going to get you into civilian care, closer to home.
I think that's
And
I don't want to kind of anchor down on this point here. I don't want to lose this
Yeah.
point that you just said is the mindset that you had that like I'm not gonna let this defeat me. I'm gonna stay strong. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to brush by that, because I'll tell you there's a lot of people that give up or get weak, okay? And they let things succumb to that. But part of the spirit of us as fellow veterans is like
Yeah.
holding each other accountable, of like
Yeah.
demanding the very best of ourselves. Like kind of like just like esprit de corps. That's just part of what our DNA is. It's a double-edged sword. We're tough son of a bitches, but at the same time, you're not gonna quit.
yeah, no,
You're not gonna
there
quit.
is no quit.
And you can't, no matter what situation you face. So I want to commend you. It's amazing that was your next reaction. So keep going. I'm sorry.
So from there, he said you got cancer, and then they ran some tests, did MRIs and stuff, specifically of my neck where the swelling was. It was pretty obvious.
How long
And
did it take to get back?
oh, that was almost immediate. Like it was there while I was at the hospital, because it was at the emergency room, so they had people there to quickly respond to all of it. And he got me in within a week. I was seeing Dr. Stiles with East Alabama Medical Center, ear, nose, and throat.
When did they diagnose the actual cancer that you had?
So I don't remember exactly what my diagnosis date was.
So wasn't that time at the MRI? You still didn't know.
No, they couldn't
Yeah.
they couldn't legally diagnose it. I had to go have a biopsy done,
Yeah.
which is where Dr. Stiles came in.
Okay.
He did a needle biopsy, and that confirmed it was cancer. Then they did a lympectomy and removed 5 lymph nodes. That's the nice scar you see there.
That's sweet.
Looks good. Yeah.
Tell how the story.
Yeah. No, I didn't get carjacked or anything. That's what everybody asked. Oh, should be carjacked? Like somebody trying to cut your throat? Well, somebody did cut my throat, but not in that manner.
So what kind of cancer did you have?
It was Hodgkin's lymphoma.
I don't know what that was.
I had heard of it, but no, not really. Like,
There's a chat GBT that says you can go to Google and search.
From there, actually, I had a really good oncologist, Dr. Linda Farmer. She She was an absolutely amazing woman.
Mm,
She unfortunately passed a couple of years ago from
mm.
cancer herself, but she she sat me down and she was very very personable, and she just like, hey, this is what's going on, like here's what it means, but here's how we're going to get through this. And
Mm.
just that level of care that she extended, it really meant a lot. And
There's a VA doctor.
no,
No.
no, this was through East Alabama
So
Medical
once you went to
Civilian Care.
civilian care,
Um,
there was civilian care that did an MRI. Or no,
no, that
that was
the
VA.
that was
And
the
then it was
VA
got it.
emergency room doctor, and he did
He
he
saved
did a
your life.
lot. He did a lot, and he saved my life. And then he sent me to Dr. Stiles,
Yeah.
and Dr. Stiles, in order to get the VA approval for them to do the lymph node biopsy, the lymphectomy, and everything, uh, he was having trouble getting them to respond because they were so slow through the community care office and everything.
You have a giant lump on your neck, and you couldn't
Yeah.
get approved to.
Well, he had one of his nurses stand there and fax the VA every 10 minutes.
Fact.
Yes, fax the VA
What
every
year is this?
2018.
So we're
December of
talking
2018.
5 years ago.
Yeah, 5 years ago.
Fact.
Yep. VA loves fax machine.
Okay.
They do a lot by fax.
Okay. So
So
we're faxing every 10 minutes.
every 10 minutes faxing the same request for,
How long did this go on?
I don't know. I know it was a while. It was a few hours at least. And then they got the approval relatively quick. And
You ran out of toner on the other side. So
probably, probably.
Okay.
So yeah, they got the approval back. He did the surgery to remove the lymph node.
How fast did the turn that? Was it days? Was it weeks?
Oh, it was a week or so.
Yeah, so it was pretty quick.
I think it was the first week I got the needle biopsy. The next week I had the lymph node removal, and then it was like Christmas. And then after that, I had my chemo port installed, did a bone marrow biopsy.
This is all in December.
December / the very first week of January.
So once you get to the right
2019
diagnosis, actions taken.
Yeah. So I got diagnosed before Christmas.
Yeah.
And I know I can remember that everything was kind of just a whirl at
Yeah.
that point, because I didn't even realize it was that it was Christmas Eve. I posted the announcement to everyone that I had been diagnosed with cancer.
Bring in the new year.
So it was Christmas Eve,
Jeez.
and I didn't even know what day of the week it was. I just, hey, I've been holding on to this information for a few days now, but I wanted to let everybody know, I don't know how things are about to go for me. This situation was still progressing as well. Like the paralysis was continuing further and further. And, as I said, I was at a point where I was waking up every morning noticeably weaker than I was the day before.
So you make this announcement as a fellow veteran. What was the support in the community like at that point?
My really close friends, they all were very supportive. Like, oh, keep us updated, let us know how it goes and stuff. But overall, not a whole lot. And that may have been on me. I've got a friends list of maybe 600 people, 700 people on my Facebook. I don't have a large following on there or anything like that. It was a little disheartening, that a lot of people that, like my actual platoon members and stuff, a lot of them, no response from them or anything. And I reached out to a lot of them to give them a heads up. Like, hey, we served together. We were right next to each other on numerous occasions, exposed to the same things. And, I'm way outside of the age group that I should have been in. Hodgkin's lymphoma, it attacks typically teenagers and middle aged, not late 20s. I'm right in between groups. There's nobody my age getting Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so it's a pretty clear indication that it's something
out of the normal that
something that I went through in my life, and a big chunk of that was the army. At that point,
you ever feel like that almost people were scared to hear their answer and the prognosis and like really the details because
I think more than anything, it doesn't really sink in with a lot of people.
yeah,
It's kind of a, well, that sucks, but it's not me. You know,
their
um,
own battles they're trying to figure out.
like I've told people my story countless times. Just through conversation, and even then, it still doesn't sink in. I had a good buddy of mine named John. He just came to visit me, and like the first thing he said, well, I shouldn't say the first thing, but one of the things he said before he left was, he was like, I didn't realize it was that bad. Like you'd gone through that much. He was like, I thought you were doing like a lot better than, that's kind of how you come off online, is you're doing pretty good. And
Well, I will say that you have a very great attitude, you're happy-go-lucky. I mean, considering what
well,
you've been through, you're a
I
likable
mean,
guy. It's like you didn't realize you really approached this whole thing.
at the end of the day, I had a choice. I could either be miserable with the cards that I'm dealt and take it out on those that are around me that are there trying to support me, which they don't deserve, or and be miserable, as I said, be miserable myself,
Hmm.
or I could, you know, find the best in the situation and find other things to be happy about, not focus on the negative aspects of it, and try to make the best of the situation. Because at the end of the day, if I'm miserable, I'm the one who's suffering, not anybody else.
Mm.
You know, as I said, most people don't even comprehend like what a day is like for me, you know.
Mm.
So
But
they're not going to be miserable by my situation just because
mhm,
of what I'm going through.
that's a really strong mental mindset that some people can't do that. I just
Yep.
commend you, and there's a lot of people out there that can approach it in that manner. So you you start chemotherapy, right? So that's like around the corner now.
Yeah. So going into first week of January, as I said, I got a chemo port installed. I had a bone marrow biopsy, spinal tap, and some other stuff, and they got me all ready for chemo. Uh, we this part may be a bit TMI for
Hey,
viewers or whatever, but
we can always cut it out.
yeah, I figured a side effect of chemo oftentimes is sterility. And at 28, I didn't have any kids or anything, but doesn't mean I didn't necessarily want them. So, Dr. Farmer, my oncologist, she was insistent that I go to a fertility clinic and make a deposit. Um, so she pulled strings, got authorization, got me sent to Birmingham to fertility clinic there.
You don't have to
And
give all the details out.
no,
You
no,
can
no,
part out.
that was a whole fiasco.
That might be good.
That was a whole fiasco in and of itself.
Yeah. I bet. At this point in time, you have no use for your arm.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
nothing.
All right,
Nothing.
we'll let the viewership work through that one.
And yeah, and they do not have machines, which is what my girlfriend at the time thought.
I'll see about the girlfriend. That makes. Yeah.
Tried to, but no.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
So this doctor's really forethought. I mean, it's really impressive to think.
yeah, as I said, like the level of care that she provided
Yeah.
was just amazing. It was very personable. Like she really truly cared.
So you got
And
some Sheldon sitting out there in the bank somewhere, just waiting.
had
Hat.
had
Okay.
had.
Right.
They only store them for so long.
So
um, and and they have verified the chemo did not cause sterility either. So
there you go.
chemo seemed to be great for me, and I didn't have a lot of negative side effects from the chemo.
Good.
I never threw up from it. I had some nausea and stuff, but I took Nexium, and I'd just double up on the days that I'd have chemo and stuff. And
How much do you think that that's more? I mean, obviously, there's a physical. I'm not going to degrade.
Hydration was the biggest thing,
Okay.
honestly. I think the majority of nausea from the chemo and stuff comes from the dehydration.
Mm,
It kills fast replicating cells, and then it sucks the moisture right out of you. That's why you get constipated. That's why you get headaches and chills and all these other things. Is it sucks the moisture out of you. So I would hydrate like crazy. Like we're talking a gallon to a gallon and a half of water a day before chemo, and then as much water as I could force myself to drink
mm.
on the days following, and I'd recover from the symptoms in 2 or 3 days.
Wow.
And then I had almost 2 weeks. I had about 11 days between that and my next chemo session to live as much of a life as I could, and go out and do things. And
You told me that you got a call from the VA. It was ironic that you had gotten a call from the VA around that same time. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So
Call. I think that's important.
well, yeah. So going back to December 7th
Yeah.
was my appointment with the fertility clinic.
Yeah.
Not December 7th, January 7th
Yeah.
of 2019 was my appointment with the fertility clinic. Then January 8th was my first chemo appointment. And so it had to be done before then. That's why it was a whole fiasco. But got done, good to go, did my first chemo on December 8th. That in and of itself, little humor with it, because they told me, well, if I had a fever, to go back to the hospital immediately. Well, my mom checked my temperature with 3 different thermometers when it said 95 degrees.
Mm,
And they didn't say what to do about, being borderline hypothermic.
yeah.
But felt better than I had in months because all of that inflammation just ceased
Mm.
at that point. So then I did 3 chemo sessions. And after my third chemo session was when I finally saw a VA approved neurologist. And they sent me to Birmingham, which was like 2.5 hours from home. Get to the appointment, and she says, "We're hospitalizing you." And they put me on high dose steroids for an entire week. Well, while I was bedridden for this entire week, getting high dose steroids and stuff, I get a phone call, and it's VA Community Care. And they were like, "Yeah, I was calling you to set up a urology consult." I said, "What? Did you say neurology?" And he's like, "No, urology." I was like, "Oh, because I'm at neurology right now. What do I need a urology one for?" He's like, "It looks like it's for a fertility clinic." And I laughed. And I was like, "Yeah, that was like, I needed that started like 6 weeks ago at this point. Like,
So
you can just cancel that consult. Thankfully, I already got it taken care of." But
it sounds like there's this disconnect.
there's a
The
huge
civilian work that you're getting, the VA, it's delayed. It's not on target for
Yep.
what you need when you need. Yeah.
It's government run healthcare.
Yeah. So how many weeks of chemo?
Wound up. I did 6 months of chemo.
Mm.
But while I was in the hospital getting the high dose steroids and everything, they didn't see the improvement that they wanted. But that was about the time I actually achieved remission. They did tests; they didn't find any signs of the cancer. Um, Yet they still believed that the cancer was in my spine, and that in and of itself, that was a whole experience. So I went into the hospital February 7th and stayed for a week till Valentine's Day. And that weekend, my father, who had not come to visit me in almost 10 years. No, actually, no, it had been 10 years. He had not come to visit me. He was coming to visit me. He was flying in finally. And so he was coming in on Friday, but then leaving Sunday morning. So I didn't have a lot of time with him, or he was coming in Thursday, maybe something like that. So I was supposed to get out of the hospital Wednesday, and go home, see him, good to go. They came to me Wednesday, though, and asked me to stay in the hospital until Friday to do a PET scan with MRI. I was already doing PET CT scans closer to home in Auburn. Uh, and so, I didn't know anything about these scans or anything. It's a PET scan. Got it. Just MRI versus CT. I'm assuming, the machine is about the same, like it's just a modified version of an existing machine, you know. Uh, I asked them, I was like, well, can I do this, just back home? Like, do I need to stay here to do it? And they really acted like it was no big deal. And I was like, well, I'm gonna go home and spend some time with my father and stuff. Well, then Friday, I'm sitting on the couch at home with my father, and my mom was out picking up groceries, and she comes home and she's bawling, and I'm sitting here like, shit, who died? Like, what family member did we lose now? Who's dead? And she's that level of crying. And she tells me that my oncologist, Dr. Farmer, had called her also in tears, saying that the neurologist believed I had been misdiagnosed and the cancer had made it into my spine, which meant that I went from having a good chance of survival down to a 1% chance. And that they would have to do highly experimental chemo injecting it into my spine.
This neurologist is a VA neurologist?
No, this is University of Alabama, UAB. And so they think that I've been misdiagnosed and I'm terminal at that point. And so unless I'm in the 1% of people that it actually works for, this spinal chemo is going to be for the rest of.
It's a death sentence.
Yeah, I'm done. And so that was Friday evening when I was supposed to be having the test that they had told me. I would have stayed, like, just say, hey, we think you're terminal. Like, we want to rule that out. Then, like, let's stay. I'll do the test. My father can come visit me in the hospital instead of at my house.
Right.
We'll figure it out. But no, they didn't say a word of it. They just called my oncologist and said, oh, hey, we think he's terminal. And so then had to wait till the following Friday to go back to Birmingham, because no, I could not do it there in Auburn. Birmingham was one of 2 facilities in the southeastern United States with that technology. Just communicate this crap, like. Anyways, so we drove back to Birmingham. It was like a 2-hour scan. Gotta lay perfectly still.
Yep.
Do that, and then they didn't read it until Monday of the following week. So it was about a 9-day period of waiting to find out, am I terminal or not?
So 9 days, you're just like,
9 days out of what I was told was going to be a very short window. That the 6 weeks of chemo I had already done and wasted time on was probably the majority of my time left. Kind of. That I was going to progress very quickly, if that was the case. So, because it would have continued to shut down my entire nervous system, and my organs would have failed.
you get the info back that you're cleared.
Yeah. So then like they do a spinal tap, they do the PET MRI, and there's no traces of the cancer and stuff, and like even. Like I did a spinal tap while I was still in the hospital, and they saw no signs of the cancer in the spinal fluid, and they still thought I had cancer in my spine. Like, absolutely ridiculous. But they called me and gave me the good news that, hey, there's no signs of it. It looks like you're clear, and it was a huge relief. And then from there, my oncologist was like, well, let's get another PET scan so we can see it and read it. And they said there was no signs. I finished out chemo, which was a total of 6 months, finished it out in June. And then I was doing every 3 months at first for PET scans, then switched to every 6 months.
Is it 2019 now?
Yeah, that was 2019.
So 2019, you get the clearance at some point.
Yep.
Now, we're going to get to kind of how we got to be introduced to you, but and kind of the personal connections that all of us have. Um, Tell me about your friend Caleb. Where does Caleb enter the story?
It's years later after I moved down here
Okay, so you're
to Tallahassee.
you're cleared with cancer, but now
Yep.
you're paralyzed.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm paralyzed, and I was in a group for veteran entrepreneurs.
Mm.
Uh, I believe, right? Yeah. Yeah, we met through that group, and uh, I think we were talking about something, just some project that one of us was working on, and he mentioned something about a veterans retreat or not a men's retreat that he was trying to put together in Alaska and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. If I had the money, I'd probably go. Alaska sounds pretty fun. It's
Hell
definitely
yeah.
on my list of things to do. And then I guess he felt inspired to talk to some other guys, and he was like, hey, I want to sponsor you to, come out. I want to try to fundraise and sponsor you to come out and participate in this event and, hang out with the guys. And so he arranged for a raffle, got some companies to donate prizes and stuff, and did a raffle to raise the money to fly me and a caregiver. So another veteran buddy of mine, who was a medic in the army, I invited him to go with me, and we went and stayed in Alaska for how long? Week, about a week or so, and did all sorts of stuff up there.
More manly stuff up there.
Yeah, when watched the guys while they were doing some fishing and stuff in some of the rivers. Looked at cool rocks, done a bunch of cool rocks.
So
Uh, yeah, so I was recently out of the wheelchair. that I was in.
your condition, your process started to improve a little bit.
Yeah, so once I went into remission, the
Mhm.
paralysis stopped.
Mm-hmm.
Like it stopped progressing, I should say. It didn't
Mhm.
obviously didn't end. So February was when the paralysis stopped progressing. From there, I filed through the VA to try to get a wheelchair because when I came out of the hospital at that point, I couldn't walk anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say I couldn't walk anymore. I had to have assistance in order to walk. I couldn't walk unassisted. Um, and so
Is this? I'm sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
you. Go ahead. You're right.
no, go ahead.
So, is Caleb the first veteran that's entered into your life at this point, post dealing with this, that's been really kind of starting to get involved, intrusive? Let's call it intrusive in your life.
No, I had that same buddy that
Yeah.
went with me as a caregiver.
Yeah.
When I was going through chemo and stuff, he was right there with me. He came over, made sure I got my medicine and stuff, and he'd take me out, like just pick me up, and we'd go hang out at his house and watch Dragon Ball Z or something like that. Whatever, just
We want-
friend hang.
Yeah.
Or he'd take me to a store that he liked to go to called Bargain Hunt, where you can, it's like Amazon returns and stuff like that. You can get stuff
Yeah.
still in good shape, but for cheap prices.
How important was that relationship?
Oh, it was
during that
huge.
time?
It was absolutely huge because at that point I was homebound. I couldn't get out of the house, and the VA, their solution was, well, if I couldn't find a caregiver, to be put in a home, an assisted living facility. So I didn't want to go that route because, I mean, you want to talk about not having a life? Yeah, that's really for a 28-year-old man. Put him in an old folks home. That doesn't sound like a good time. As a matter of fact, at one point after I moved here and I got this house, I went a week without a caregiver whatsoever. I lived here alone for an entire week. My mom would leave Ziploc bags of food that I could pull the bag out, kind of open it up and dump it onto a plate, and then just kind of bite pieces of food off of it. Which,
Yeah.
you know,
It's not a great solution, dude.
no, and during that week, I had friends that were contacting, every agency they could, and it was all the, oh, we wish we could help, but you don't meet this criteria, you don't meet that criteria. The VA, when I called them, They said, well, if you can find a caregiver, we'll pay for one, but we don't provide caregivers.
Mm.
Well,
Good luck.
yeah.
You're paralyzed. Go find
How am I
yourself.
going to get out? You know, I don't
You go
get
down
out.
the
I don't know a lot of
sit down.
people. So like
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time on the internet. I was paying $70 a month for care.com and messaging, like actively searching on there, messaging people. And now, mind you, in order to use my phone, I've got to set it on a stand and scroll with my nose. You know, I use a touchscreen phone in my nose to operate it. And so, like, I getting to a point, I'm developing arthritis in my neck from doing those things and stuff.
You get calluses on your nose.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen how well you use your nose to do things. It's extremely impressive.
I'm doing everything I can to try to find someone. My saving grace was my younger sibling. My mom happened to call them and was like, "Hey, any chance you want to move back to Tallahassee?" And their response was, "Yeah, actually, that sounds great." And it took them a week to get here, but they moved in and took care of me for a year until I found my current caregiver.
Mm. So you meet Caleb. Caleb takes you in this paralytic state to Alaska
Yep,
to climb mountains,
flies Levi and I, and
to
yeah,
hike mountains.
we did a glacier
This
hike.
guy's trying to kill you.
No. He showed me a good time.
Showed you a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah. We there's something to the theme of dramatic for us military guys.
Oh,
But so you go up there, you do this,
I mean,
develop a relationship.
don't get me wrong. I did almost die on the trip, but I don't think it was intentional. Did you?
We didn't laugh during
If
the
you
time.
didn't
it
almost
fell
die,
off.
did you really live? You
Yeah,
know, like
yeah.
I went to Alaska, the wild frontier. If I didn't almost die, then it was a failed experience.
That's right. You got to live right up
But
to the edge.
like, oh, I lived right up to the edge. That was for sure.
You're talking, and you told me, during this state that you've been in for the last few years, you're talking about going on hikes.
Yeah.
You're going on these trips. You're still making life happen.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's huge, man. So at what point you guys depart from Alaska? You had this great experience. You guys stay in contact.
Yeah, and so I watched various projects, humanitarian projects that Caleb was, getting involved in or trying to help get started and things like that. Um, and he kind of traveled around a bit doing all of those things, and then we were talking, and I was like, "Yo, man, hey, where you at now? Like, how have you been doing?" One day, and he was like, "Oh, I'm living in Georgia, And I was like, "Where?" And he gives me a time. I'm like, "Bro, you're 2 hours from me. Like,
Let's go. Yeah.
let's go, come visit. Like, I'll put you up for a day or two. It's your turn." And and then so he came to visit, and it wound up he was remote working, but he had to do some traveling out to like California. So he drove down here and flew out of Tallahassee International Airport, and so he was just going to use that kind of as a hub for him to do his traveling and just come visit periodically. Then, unfortunately, the home situation they had there, just wasn't working out, and they were looking for a place to go. And he called me up and he was like, "Hey, like, we love camping. Like, can we come camp in your yard?" And I strongly advised against camping being a permanent solution, but told him come on down and we'd figure it out.
And you were still really looking for a long-term, permanent caregiver at this time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have my current one, but
Yeah.
I didn't have I don't have a didn't have a home health aide at the moment. So like she wasn't receiving any respite care or anything like that. So it's literally 24/7 for her, just go, 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 trying to be there to make sure that my needs are met and that the house is taken care of, and everything that needs to be done gets done.
So you have this
And
veteran that walks into your life, tells you to go to Alaska, hike a bunch of mountains, almost die, comes and visits, and then says, "I'm gonna move my family down and live out of a can or a tent
tent
in
in
the
your
backyard
backyard. Yeah.
and be your best buddy." And um, this was normal. This is normal because I think
To
it's
an
funny,
extent, yeah, like
because you would, it's funny how as veterans we what normal people would think is not normal for like this. You know what I mean? Like this is like an out. This is just what the mission required. Something was calling, whatever. So they moved down here, and I've seen the photo. I've seen the video.
Yeah,
I mean, this is like shanty town in Afghanistan, or like some like
we made it work.
And so they live in middle of summer for 6 months, or I don't know how many
Well,
months was. How many
yeah,
months?
it
4 months.
it was a couple of months, and then it wound up just being they moved inside the house. Like when the rainstorms clapped the tents the first time, it was a short stay in the house, and then all right, they hard charged it. Caleb was, no, we're gonna make these tents work. Like we're gonna camp.
Yeah,
This is gonna be a fun summer.
yeah.
And he was insistent on we're gonna camp this out. And then the second time that the rain just collapsed the tents on them,
You're like, come on.
even with wooden reinforcements to the framework,
Yeah.
he was like, all right, like
What hurricane did they go through?
it wasn't a hurricane.
No, just bad storm. Got it.
Daily thunderstorms.
So they're here. Does that help with your situation at all?
Oh yeah, no, they've been a huge help. Caleb actually just built a loft in my storage building and stuff to store my Halloween decorations and stuff. And
Yeah.
his wife's been my home health aide for a while, and she comes and helps clean and gets things done and helps keep so
Sort of a-
everything stay caught up.
So a relationship gets developed.
Yeah.
Sort of God intervenes and kind of just brings your two lives together.
Yeah, yeah,
Still to this day. He moves here permanently. Now they have their own place. They don't live in a tent anymore.
and it was really nice gaining a friend that like I could be honest with and stuff. Like I've noticed a lot of people, no matter what you say, they've got their own issues going on, so they take things you say as an attack and affront to them, and it doesn't matter what it is. It's their traumas that they're dealing with, not something that you've actually said.
So-
And so he and I, we've had some very long, deep conversations about where we stand and stuff like that. And we've reached a point where if one of us is feeling something or something like that, we just, hey, like, this is how I'm feeling. Can you help me? Can you help me with this? And it's, oh yeah, hey, like, well, maybe this is the problem. Like, maybe we can do this different. Here's how we can resolve this between us, because it doesn't need to be an issue or anything like that.
That's kind of why we were talking about today.
He said he loves having a friend that, when it's late at night and he's just tired, he can be like, yo, hey, you mind going home? Like, oh yeah, my bad, dude. Am I overstaying? Like, shit, let me get out the door.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of ties into kind of the theme we were talking about today. It's like, feel something, say something, and there's a point in time where we've got to put our egos aside.
Yeah.
We got to be real and raw, and maybe we are trained and we joke around in the Marine Corps. It's like, here's a straw, suck it up.
Yeah.
Suck it up. Quit being a baby. So, don't say, just go suck it up. Call it the suck, whatever you want to call it. Marine Corps, Army Industry got their own. And
embrace the suck.
Embrace the suck.
Yeah,
embrace the suck, right? But that mentality over and over, years and years, becomes part of your MO.
Yeah.
The problem is,
if it ain't raining, you ain't training.
That's right.
Like,
that's right.
You expect that bad weather.
Yeah.
Like, that's just a normal part of life.
Yeah, just bivouac in the backyard here. No big deal. Suck it up. You'll be fine. But at some point in time, there's a boundary to that we've talked about.
Definitely.
Like, if you feel something, you got to be in the best relationship, the strongest relationship, as veteran to veteran, community to community. Is we've got to be able to create a space in which it's like, dude, it's okay. Put your ego aside. I ain't well. I need you. I need. You know what? I need you to go home. Or I'm feeling this way. What do you think? And you got to have those conversations. And sometimes it's hard. Our ego's in the way.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And it also, like, we wind up developing this mentality of not needing help. So it makes it almost impossible to ask for help later on down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's something I've greatly struggled with. Is I was the guy everybody else turned to. So when this all happened to me, like, I didn't know who to turn to. I didn't know who I could rely on, things like that. And so I had to learn to ask for help. And that was really hard for me. I still struggle with it, and it's been 5 years of dealing with this, because I don't want to feel like a burden to other people. I don't want to, inconvenience other people, but at the same time, I still have needs. I have things that have to be done. Um,
It's tough to where the line gets drawn between really needing help and really just need to suck
yeah,
it up.
yeah,
And
and
sometimes you just have to be open to all things could be possible. And it's like, hey, let's talk about it.
yep,
Um, I remember in my career, there's many times I would take people what we called the fourth floor. I don't know if y'all had that, but
yeah, oh yeah.
we had the fourth floor.
I think it's based on the base that you're at,
Yeah.
which
Floor?
floor it is,
It's-
because I think it
Y'all had more
may
money.
have
You
been the
probably had the
seventh
fifth
floor.
or sixth or seventh floor. We
Maybe it was the fifth. I don't know. I heard about it. Never
Yeah.
visited, but heard about
The
it.
problem is it's waiting too late to say something.
Uh-huh.
It's waiting. You're struggling early and often, or there's retribution. You may be in a career field. In my career field, in aviation, you have anything medically or mentally wrong with you, you better not say anything
Yeah,
because
no,
that's going to
that's
screw your career.
that's not limited to just aviation either.
That's right. Yeah.
That's
So that's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
So getting in,
off times, like it can be like blood in the water.
yeah,
Even our fellow veterans and stuff, we can be, or fellow service members when we were in. Sometimes it really was like sharks, blood,
Yeah.
blood in the water.
You didn't want to be
smell
targeted.
weakness,
Yeah, you don't want to be targeted. So
because weakness gets you killed.
that's right. It does. Yeah. So I so that kind of embarks on this journey of like just education of advocating for each other and just
Yeah,
being real and raw, especially is like we can drop the egos as we exit the military because we need to rely on each other. In this situation, you had some veterans that you got to rely on.
yeah.
That-
Um, I would I tried to, even with everything that went on, like I tried to not have to rely on other people even through it. And because of that, like I had to do a lot of things. I had to learn how to become my own advocate. Um and that was difficult. Like I had to write letters to congressmen and senators just to get adequate care um at certain points. I was paralyzed for 2 months before I got a wheelchair through the VA. Like paralyzed, unable to walk,
so
because I was rated at 80%. I was getting $1,600 a month. The roof on my house had developed a leak and was starting to cave in on me.
this is all post cancer.
Yeah, I was in chemo at the time. I wasn't getting any physical or occupational therapy for the paralysis. I didn't start physical therapy until April of 2019. I didn't see an occupational therapist until after I moved to Tallahassee in December of 2019. Now, mind you, the majority of recovery happens in the first 6 months. So I lost the entire first 6 months of my injury with no real therapy. I got some physical therapy towards the end. And that's probably the biggest reason why I'm ambulatory today, why I can walk. I got a physical therapist who pulled strings to get me into aquatic therapy. Number one, because I couldn't walk. Like, so that gave me the ability to move without gravity. The facility that they had a zero gravity treadmill that he got me on. He used blood flow restriction bands to turn the exercises I was doing with my legs from aerobic into anaerobic exercise, which I went from being barely able to stand up to doing 90 sit stands with these restrictive cuffs on in a couple of minutes within weeks.
Were you
And I just exploded up.
were you at 100% disability
No,
at this time?
at that point in time, I was only rated at
So
80%. So
80%. You're going
$1,600 a
through
month,
cancer.
pay all of my bills, take care of myself and my mom, and
Why did you
try
try
to.
that? Why do you think that happened?
I wasn't service connected.
Wasn't
The,
service connected.
the cancer was not proven to be service connected, and they denied it. As a matter of fact, when I filed for it.
So you and I both served in Afghanistan in the same region.
Yep.
We both were, well, at the time, depending on the region, it was either RC South or Southwest combination. It was a shithole.
Yep.
But um, as you and I both know, you spend a year in that region, it's nothing but dust and burn pit and
It,
just breathing
there's a
in
lot of
shit.
trash. I mean,
Yeah,
you don't swim in the rivers. Why? Because it's sewage. You
yeah.
don't. You got to be careful breathing in the air because there's dust storms that come through that are so bad that you can't see 10 feet in front of you. But then you also have days where the open air burn pits have the smoke so thick that, well, it's like being in one of
We
those dust storms.
we had no idea what potential risks there were. I guess in that, I don't
Oh
think
no,
anyone really did at that time.
not at all. Like
All the way up to the end of the war, they were still
they were still
almost
using
burning.
them,
Yeah.
which
So
they weren't ever supposed to be.
yeah,
Um, and
yeah.
I know both of my deployments that we had burn pits because either I was directly in view of them or we had soldiers that worked the detail.
Well, the interesting thing about this, I don't know that people know this, and you may know this, but we would uh, we would be forced to contract hire out the trash. At some point, we said stop burning. We would contract
Yeah, it
hire
was
the trash.
a
Yeah,
I don't remember
yeah.
the company name that was supposed to be in
Right.
charge of the incinerators.
So they decide we decided at some point, we as America, senior leadership said, hey, let's pack this trash up and sell it or pay someone to move it and take it off the base or what have you. Well, some of these contract companies would just move it off the base
and then burn it.
and then burn it.
Yeah. And not
we
the
just-
incinerators that they were paid to use.
which made it worse.
They just open air burn pit, burned it.
And no ability because it was through 2-3 levels of
Even
contract.
in 2012 during
Yeah.
my last deployment, you know, as I said, we had soldiers that worked burn pit detail.
Yeah.
We had one, he almost cut his finger off because he was carving on a stick while he was sitting there at the burn pit.
It's no different. You tell people in the backyard on a fire pit where you grab a bunch of trash, plastic,
Yeah,
you throw it on the trash. I guarantee you immediately you're going to start to feel and smell and taste something that does not normal. Imagine doing that for 365 days. So anyway, so this I think was kind of a silent thing that people really didn't know, but did know. It was kind of this thing that started to get exposed over time. Caleb, burn pit. For those that don't know what a burn pit, have you seen a burn pit?
yeah.
Tell us what a burn pit is.
One of the ones that we had, think a football field that's dug down a few feet. It's got a whole bunch of flaming piles of trash with little tiny fire breaks in between it for the Humvees to drive to dump more trash on them.
Mhm.
And that's basically it.
That was our trash disposal.
Yep.
plan.
Every type of waste that you can imagine. I know there's been articles that have come out that said that they found human remains, they found chemicals, they found lots of batteries and things like that.
And the JP8 was used. It depends on the fob and the what year and things.
I know we use JP8 for a lot, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if we used it for
Yeah.
burning waste, human waste.
So, do you believe that was connected?
Oh.
That was connected to the cancer you received. It was an abnormal cancer.
Yeah. So, like my oncologist ran a lot of tests and stuff before she was willing to write a medical opinion stating that she believed that it came directly from the burn pits.
Anybody else in your family ever have cancer?
My uncle who was in the Navy had melanoma.
Interesting.
My
Service connected.
My great grandmother on my mother's father's side developed colon cancer at a very advanced age or something like that. But that's it. That's the sum total of cancer in my family.
Service members, cancer. I told you about my dad. My dad was in Vietnam era. He died of cancer, never smoked, didn't do any tobacco in his life, died from throat cancer.
My uncle, I wasn't surprised. I mean, he went AWOL, went to Mexico for a few years. Like, I'm not surprised that he wound.
So Caleb at some point gets involved in this story. At what point? Tell me how Caleb, Hunter 7, tell me this story about what does Hunter 7 do and how did they get involved in your story?
So I'm not the most well versed on the sum total
Well,
of what
we're gonna talk.
Hunter
Caleb's get an
7
opportunity to
does,
talk more
but
about it, but
um,
tell me your side and how you saw this.
it was shortly at so Caleb, he moved here March of uh, of 2023, and uh, wound up meeting the Hunter 7 crew and stuff. Then he's the one that introduced me to them. He just, you know, he got me in contact with them, thought they might be able to help. And through the conversation with them, I had just recently looked back into this stem cell study that's been ongoing since like 2009. And I had tried to apply for it about 2 years ago or so. Um, Probably closer to three now. And at that point in time, the expense was greater than what I could do because, as I said, I was only rated at 80% going through all of this.
And this
And
stem cell potentially gives you mobility back in your.
it's shown a lot of promise in neural regeneration. They actually they'd had studies where they filled in gaps up to 7 to 8 millimeters,
Mhm.
Which I know that doesn't sound very big, but when you're talking about your nerve, that's pretty drastic. And nerves regenerate at a rate of maybe 2 to 3 millimeters per year.
Mm.
So, I mean, you're talking about shortening nerve damage by a significant amount of time.
Mhm.
There's been studies. There's a surfer named Chris Barr. He uh, he broke his neck multiple times in a bad surfing accident, I think it was. And he received stem cell after several years of being paralyzed. And within a year, he went from being a quadriplegic to walking and using his hands and stuff. He wasn't back to
Mhm.
his prime condition, but it's a it's a whole lot better than being confined to a wheelchair. You know,
So what's the cost to get this thing done?
$17,700
Yeah, so I mean
is
that's
the current
you
rate
got
for it.
in the backyard some cash you can dig up and.
Yeah, right. Like
Mhm.
that's what I would have hoped. But as I said, I wasn't even rated 100% up until earlier this year because I had to wait until August of last year for the PACT Act to go into effect. And then I was able to file, and my cancer became presumptive
Mhm.
to the burn pits. So, as an OEF veteran that deployed to an area that had burn pits
Twice,
and
right?
twice, and developing this cancer, it became presumptive.
Mm.
And so that gave me the service connection so I could finally get to 100%. Um,
Mm.
and
That's a huge thing.
yeah,
That's huge. That changes the game.
Yeah, it,
So
it changed. It changed it drastically for me, and I think it's going to have a huge impact for a lot of other veterans because it's not going to be a repeat of Agent Orange for the Vietnam veterans. How long it took for things to become presumptive to Agent Orange. You're a lot of veterans died from their conditions long before
Mhm.
it got recognized.
Mhm.
And I believe a lot more veterans would have received treatment for their conditions had they been approved for it. And, you know, I think, I think it's unfortunate that, it really does seem to boil down to, these little bureaucracies as to whether or not you get adequate care through the VA when you don't know what you signed that check for when you joined up.
Mhm.
You know, we talk all the time about how veterans sign a blank check for anything and everything up to including their life
Mhm.
when they sign that dotted line to join the military. Because you deploy, you expect I may not make it home from this, but then you don't consider 10 years, 5, 10 years after you get out of the military, cancer being what's going to
And no one's thinking
knock you
about.
out, you
I
know?
tell you how many people leave the military every day. I don't think anyone's thinking about cancer. The next thing to look
No,
at.
you didn't sign up for that.
That-
You
yeah,
didn't sign up for, oh, hey, by the way, there's a huge likelihood that you're going to get cancer after you get
I
out.
know no one told me that.
If somebody had told me that, I'd have second guessed what I was doing, you know?
Yeah.
Well, hey,
But
isn't there a better option here? Like, is there a better way we can have a fighting force that, can protect our country and be the envy of the rest of the world,
yeah,
but not kill ourselves? Like, can we make that a stipulation of like, hey, how about we don't guarantee death
mhm.
in some variety?
No one's telling you, hey, this is the signs to look for too.
Yeah, no,
I wouldn't. If
but
someone would have said, hey, man,
it wasn't.
paralysis could be a sign of
It
cancer.
was
You might
not.
think about it twice.
Yeah, right. Like, and my condition was rare. The
Sure.
perineoplastic is extremely rare. I think when it all first happened, we sat down and did the math on it and everything. And statistically, like one person worldwide receives the diagnosis that I got. One person worldwide receives the diagnosis that I got every 14 months. So out of 7+ billion people, you know, one person every 14 months. That's extremely rare.
I think what
It's unheard of. But I mean, obviously it is somewhat heard of because a doctor just glanced at me and knew what was wrong with
when
me.
your situation with paralysis, it wasn't everybody. Let's say, as you said, it's rare, but in general, I think what we've
Yeah, the
talked
weight
about
loss,
is- yeah,
that's a common side effect. Almost everybody I know that's got cancer or a neurologic disease, because those are also other issues that are showing up. They're finding that a lot of veterans have brains that look like Swiss cheese.
hmm
You know,
Well, yeah. I mean,
and
we go through traumatic
TBI, we
TBI
get
exercises.
exposure
We
to
don't know.
toxins and
So
metals, and
I think the point that I'm kind of driving at here is that as you're exiting, these are things that we need to make sure we communicate
yeah,
to other veterans and the people in our community. It's like, hey, look, that ego we talked about needs to be checked at the door.
I
And anything you feel,
every time I hear about somebody that's joining the military and stuff,
Mhm,
they ask me, "Well, would you do it again?" Yeah, I probably would.
mhm,
I would still serve. There are some things I wish I knew then that I now know, and I try to relay those things to future potential service members and stuff. And one of the biggest ones, document everything,
mhm.
especially medical stuff, because you don't know how it's going to affect you later. That torn meniscus or blown out meniscus that you have now may require an entire knee replacement later.
Mhm,
And if you don't have that documented, well, now you're fighting to prove service connection on why you don't have a knee anymore.
mhm,
Um, or that exposure that you had to this place, may wind up giving you cancer, or
mhm.
a condition that you don't recover very easily from.
Yeah. So your thing is, let's open an honest document. Don't try to hide anything just because you've got a
Yeah,
tough up
yeah,
mentality,
like
suck up
being in the
mentality.
82nd, there's a lot of that mentality of you don't go to sick call.
Yeah.
If you do, you're malingering. That's what it is.
Yeah.
You're trying to get out of work. You're not actually sick.
Mhm,
I even with my back injury,
mhm,
I faced a bit of that. It was questioned quite often, well, are you really hurt? Because I tried my best not to let it stop me. But what most people didn't know is if I took off my shirt, the left side of my back was atrophied, and the right side was so hypertrophied from overcompensating that I was discharged with scoliosis because my spine was being pulled to one side
mhm.
from just overbuilt muscle on one side and no support on the other. And it took them 2 years to do MRIs of my back to realize what had happened
Mhm.
and that there was actually damage.
So we're talking about documenting. I think the second thing is as you get out, the mentality of suck it up. Hey, if you feel something, say something. And the third, I think that's really valuable of your story is immerse yourself in a community, an advocacy of people that are supporting you and honestly holding you accountable to going to the doctor
Oh yeah, without a
or
doubt.
doing these things that you need to do.
I've got
Yeah.
friends that even while I was going through chemo, I would encourage them like, hey, like go to the VA, get yourself invested in the VA and get seen so that way you can file your claims, things like that. And now they're sitting there. It's been 5 years, and now they're finally trying to do all these things, and they're
Mhm.
having a much harder time uh, getting these claims approved and stuff because they sat on them for 5 years.
Mhm.
And so, I encourage them, hey, go get seen, go get checked out. And through that, if they go get seen and evaluated, there's always the chance that these conditions will actually get noticed at an earlier time, you know. Um,
So I'm gonna kind of wrap up on a few things that I want to make sure that gets out there. We talked about documentation; it's important. Check that ego. I'm
yep.
gonna again repeat that, and get yourself involved in a community of fellow veterans and supportive group, because you need that.
Yep.
And don't wait till the end of your cycle, your career, whatever, to start building this tribe around
No,
you that
try
when
to
you get out is really important.
whenever you get out, I encourage people to
Yeah.
find a local veteran organization or something to meet other veterans.
Hmm.
There's also, even through the VA, you can ask your primary care team or the social workers and stuff if there are some veteran groups that you can connect with, even if it's just like a veteran fishing group or just a hobby that you enjoy that you can get in with them.
Yep.
Um,
So and I think that we have an over reliance on the VA and expecting them to just be the savior. It's a resource, it's a tool, it's one of the people in your tribe. It's not your entire tribe.
nope.
And so I would say that when you're out, you need to start planning your exit much earlier. Build yourself a tribe, and that tribe needs to have coach you and mentor you and teach you all the things that you don't know. That there's another side of the military as you get out that you didn't know, or side of life, and we need to make sure that we get that training as we get out. And let's not rely on the VA. Let's rely on the prior veteran tribe to help
Yeah,
get us through this.
a group of successful veterans that have reintegrated into American society
Mhm.
is really what everybody should strive for when they get out, because having that guidance, someone to turn to, hey, like I'm running into this issue, like
Mhm.
what do I do? You need to have that guy for navigating the VA. You need to have that guy you can call for this issue, that issue,
Mhm. Yeah,
whatever it
when you're
is.
when you're in the military, you look left and right to the rank, and you could ask your buddy as you get out. You're
Well,
losing some of that.
and the military itself is designed where there's a job for everything.
Mhm.
So when you need something done, oh, go see supply.
Mhm.
You know, you need paper, go see supply. You don't have to question
Mhm.
who do I turn to, or if you do have to question, hey, who do I turn to? There's somebody who probably knows. Oh yeah, that's this shop over here. Go to S1, go to S6, go to you know whatever shop you need to go to
Mhm.
find
Yeah,
find what you need.
that's right.
And so finding that in the civilian world becomes important, knowing who to turn to.
What are your hopes for the future of this veteran community as well as the VA? What would you hope for this community in the VA? What's the definition of success?
Hmm. Uh, something has to be done with the VA about being able to get veterans to appointments. I mean, there's already been a lot that has been done. Don't
Mhm.
get me wrong, but even now, so with it, especially with long-term care patients, it seems like there's not a whole lot there. The VA, they'll approve for community care occupational therapy. They'll
Mhm.
approve 15 visits, which is valid for up to a year, the authorization, but it's only 15 visits. If you're going twice a week for a severe neurological condition, that's 7.5 weeks.
Mhm.
But a reauthorization approval takes 6 weeks.
Mhm.
Well, do the math. That means you get 3 visits in before you have to file the paperwork to not have a lapse in care. You know,
Mm,
well, they won't allow you to file for a renewal until you've used at least half of the visits.
mm,
So that means you got to go through at least 7 or 8 of the visits before you can file them.
mm.
That means you've got maybe 3 weeks. So you wind up going with these 3 week to 6 week gaps in between therapy, which you can't do that when you're, trying to rebuild from a severe condition.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, so things like that, things like access to caregivers and stuff. Because as I said, like the VA says, we don't provide caregivers. We'll pay for one, but we don't provide them. And veterans that are in this condition, they can't get out and just find a caregiver. And the resources that are there are not, they're not perfect. They're not even adequate. As I said, I was spending $70 a month on care.com and nothing.
So would it be fair to say in the meantime, while the VA improves every day, it's fair that we can rely and lean on the Hunter Sevens, the One
That
Tribe, the
that's
Wounded War, all these organizations that are there to help stop gap.
that's
That,
really what it winds up boiling down to, is finding an organization that supports your needs,
mhm.
which there are a lot of great organizations out there. It's finding that one that fits sometimes is impossible,
So
you know.
to close this, you've got Hunter Seven that's on your side,
Yep.
and they've raised almost $10,000 of the $17,000, or helped you and your team and your tribe raise 10 out of the 17,000. You're about $7,000 short today. About 10 days left to go. Um, so I would encourage anybody who's listening to this story to please donate, do anything you can. As fellow veterans, I think we have a duty more than anybody to contribute to this, because we understand what it's like to be in those scenarios, and we have a duty is to close ranks and protect and serve each other, regardless of whether health, sick, whatever. It's like we got to pick each other up. So I challenge all veterans to be out there to donate to this cause. If this one's closed, to another one, anything, because that's what our duty is. We fought together to be in a position to help each other, and that's why we get out, so we can be successful and continue to support each other. So let's make that happen for Sheldon. And
We're gonna put one of those call the number at the bottom of the
Yeah,
screen
right.
things on there, little banner.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of great organizations out there,
Yeah.
but there is no full stopgap that you can just say turn to these people. Not yet, at least.
Mhm.
That's kind of what we've all discussed, is eventually building something that it is that stopgap, that, you know, the metaphorical plug for the holes in the boat so we stop sinking.
So the
Um,
transitioning vet that's getting out doesn't have VA medical care right now. He or she doesn't know where to go. What would you tell them to do?
um, I honestly, I'd still suggest they try going to the VA.
Go to the VA,
You know,
get
it,
involved
it
in their
doesn't hurt to ask.
Mhm.
You know, the worst they can do is tell you no.
Yeah.
And so go there and raise hell, talk, not not in an aggressive manner where they're going to kick you out. Obviously, you have to have some tact with all of it, but go in there and don't take no for an answer. Get questions answered. Do find out what you can do through them. Find out if there are resources in the area. If the VA doesn't work, try the VFW, the American Legion, the main organizations that are out there, and contact them and ask,
Mhm.
and find your local veterans. Find as many local veterans as you can to talk to and ask them, or they don't even have to be local.
Mhm.
Turn to social media, ask your buddies, hey, does anybody know a resource for this? Does anybody know where I can turn to, what I can find? I get messages every so often from people, hey, have you heard about this? Have you heard about that? I've had people ask me like about Tunnels to Towers Foundation, and I actually tried to uh, tried to apply through them. Couldn't figure out how to contact. Excuse. Couldn't figure out how to contact them at the time, and now Hunter Seven has reached out to them on my behalf, and they've reached out to me.
Mhm.
Which if it hadn't been for Hunter Seven reaching out, I probably wouldn't have gotten a hold of them. Um,
Well, man, I appreciate you sharing your story. I think this is going to have a huge impact on people. Someone out there is listening to this, and this is going to help them get to a solution quicker, um, and get help before it's too late. And I appreciate you sharing the story. We all do. Is there anything last thing you want to say?
uh,
So,
it's just don't be afraid to ask for help. That's the biggest thing. The best piece of advice I could give anyone. Just don't be afraid to ask for help and be the squeaky wheel. Don't take no for an answer. Use every available resource that you have to get an answer because you're the hero of your story. So if you don't care about yourself, then you can't expect that everybody else is going to. Not I'm not trying to say that people don't care,
mhm.
just that it's a lot harder to care about somebody who doesn't care about themselves, and it's a lot harder to help somebody if they don't take those steps to getting to that point.
Mhm.
So
Good.
being able to turn to people and accepting the help is, I guess, really where that starts. You know, as they say, first you got to admit there's a problem.
Well, usually I'd reach out and give you a handshake, but
Yeah, no, I'm too lazy for that.
thanks,
I'll
bud.
give you an elbow.